I know that one of the biggest fears for speakers is what if I forget what to say? What if I make a mistake on stage, especially if it's live, even if it's not on stage, if it's on video? If it's live, how do I recover from that? Because a lot of our fears around being speakers, around being seen and heard in public, is the fear of being judged. What if I'm not as great as I say? What if I have imposter syndrome? All of those insecurities really play into the reason that people are so scared of public speaking in the first place. It's got to do with this idea of I could be judged, I might make a mistake, I may look foolish. And how do I not do that without feeling like I'm lying, without feeling like I'm being fake or projecting someone that I'm not? How do I still save face and keep my dignity about me? So, we're going to talk today about something that every speaker has experienced. If you've been speaking for a while, I don't care how professional you are, how experienced you are, we've all gone through this. Everyone will at some point have forgotten what to say, or at least messed up. They've said the wrong word, or they've stumbled over a word, they've mispronounced something. Everyone has experienced this. The difference between a good speaker and a mediocre speaker is how you recover from forgetting what to say or saying the wrong thing. So I'm going to talk about this in two different circumstances. I'm going to talk about what happens when it happens live and what to do when it's recorded, because those are quite different things depending on where you are. I'm also going to talk about forgetting versus messing up, because those are slightly different as well. So we're going to talk about how to recover from forgetting first. Now, there's going to be a lot of overlap, but I just want to keep it separate. Before I go into how to recover from forgetting or messing up, I want to say that the first thing you need to do in all of these circumstances is you have to be real. As soon as you start lying to your audience, they're not going to trust you anymore. So if you try to stop time and you go, oh no, I've forgotten what to say, just wait here a minute while I go and think about what it was and like think about it, and then I come back. You've kind of tried to pretend that it didn't happen. Just like, I'm going to stop time for a moment. You just stay here. I'm going to go backstage in my head and figure it out. That's not the best plan. Your audience is going to feel abandoned. You've disconnected from them. They're going to be like, well, what do we do in the meantime? It's like seeing someone judge themselves. It's the same kind of process. So you don't want to do that. You want to stay connected to your audience, no matter what happens, no matter how much of a mess you make. If you are with them, they will usually forgive you. We want to be engaging. We want to be connected. We want to have a relationship with our audience. So be real about it. Don't try and stop time. And also don't judge yourself in front of them, because as a speaker, you have this amazing kind of superpower in that whatever you are doing with regards to yourself, you are kind of instructing the audience to do. So if you are judging yourself, you're telling the audience to judge you. If you are not trusting yourself, you're telling the audience not to trust you. They will just absorb whatever you give them when it comes to your attitude towards yourself. So you have to stay real, stay connected. You can stay humble, absolutely. You don't need to pretend you're amazing when you're not. I mean, I think you are amazing, but you don't need to pretend you know things that you don't know. You don't need to pretend you're not human. Be human, be humble, but don't judge yourself. Don't be like, oh, I'm so stupid. Oh, I can't believe, because that's going to send you spiraling. It's another way of disconnecting from your audience. You're not with them anymore. You're now in your head judging yourself. And they are going to judge you, or they're just going to feel supremely awkward and sorry for you, which you don't want either. You want to keep that relationship. You want to keep a friendly, confident, engaging relationship with your audience. So no stopping time and no judging yourself. Okay, so the first thing, what do you do if you forget what to say? If you're live, this can be really tricky because you're like, oh, I have nothing. Again, we don't want to disconnect and think over here. We want to stay with our audience. So you've got a couple of options. If it's just a momentary thing, you could just breathe. Actually, pauses are underrated. We often don't pause enough when it comes to live speaking. So even if it feels like forever for you, if you just allow yourself to reconnect to yourself, whatever you do, don't stop breathing. Because a lot of people, when they get stuck, they stop breathing, you hold your breath, you're like, it'll come to me, but there's no extra oxygen going to your brain anymore. If you're not breathing, then everything has stopped flowing. And the chances of you being open and in creative state and remembering what to say just go down. the longer you hold your breath. So don't hold your breath. Keep breathing. Allow yourself, like, physically concentrate on relaxing, letting your breath flow, getting connected. Usually when we forget what to say, it's because we've been speaking too fast and we kind of get ahead of ourselves. So, which means that your audience is also kind of trying to keep up with you. So a pause is perfect in this circumstance. It allows you to collect yourself. It allows your audience to catch up and be like, oh, this is what's going on. Excellent. This is the end of a thing. Now we're going into a new thing. Pauses can be a real gift. So allow yourself to stop, breathe, relax, reconnect to yourself. And often just the act of relaxation will allow the thought to come. If it doesn't, you can think of what you just said. You can look at your slides or your notes. Absolutely acceptable. You don't need to comment on the fact that you're doing that. I hate it when people do that. And actually, I've done it. I hate it when I do it too. I'd rather someone just took a second, connected with their notes, looked at their slides, whatever, and didn't talk about the fact that they've lost where they are, unless they do it in a really charming way, then it's okay. So you can do that. You can revisit what you just said. You can even do that out loud. Sometimes saying the last sentence, especially if it's something you've practiced a lot, saying the sentence you've just said, especially if you can get away with saying it in a way that just sounds like you're emphasizing it, that'll help you think of what comes next. But if it doesn't, you can ask your audience. I mean, they were there. What was I just talking about? And if you've constructed your talk or your speech, I don't want to say correctly, that feels terrible, but in a logical way, what you've just said should lead into the next thing. And especially if you, what I like to do when I create a talk is I like to create around questions, because then you can see really easily the logic of the flow of thought through the talk. So if I've just said this, what is the next logical question? And, you know, you can come back, and if you forget something, it's not the end of the world. People are much more forgiving, especially on stage, live, if you forget something and go back, especially if you stay connected with your audience, if you let them know what's going on, it's not really a problem. So you can revisit what you last said, definitely take a moment, and you can always just ask your audience, what did I just say? What was I talking about? I had a moment, you know, and as long as you stay with them, that's absolutely fine. Now, if you're recorded, oh, hold on, we're talking about, no, yeah, if you're, see, I just did it. If you're recorded, you don't need to do that because you're pre-recording this. You could just do another recording. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that's a good idea, because sometimes we're doing a long form, especially I like to do one take wonders. Even if it's a 15-minute video, I like to do the whole thing in one take. I might edit it later, but I don't have to. And I really like not having to if I don't need to. I like editing to be an option for me. So, but the thing is, if you are doing it that way, if you are planning on recording everything in one take and you mess up, say halfway through, do not stop and start at the beginning again. Don't do that, because what you'll do is you'll have a whole bunch of takes of the beginning, and you'll only have one take of the whole thing, and that can actually really screw you up. If in post, if something goes wrong, your editing options are really, really limited by that. And also, it teaches you to be a bad speaker. You know, it teaches you bad habits for when you're speaking live. So better, even if this is pre-recorded, even if you know you're going to do another take because you want to do the whole thing in one take, pause and either pick up that sentence, you know, start again, or if it's a really small mistake, you can actually just kind of fumble and keep going. You don't even need to go back. But if you want it to be perfect, then go back to the beginning of that chunk. So beginning of that topic, or the beginning of that sentence, the beginning of that chapter or paragraph, and then start again. That makes it a lot easier to edit if you aren't going to do the whole thing in one take. But it also means that you have the experience of going through the entire talk, even if you're going to record it again, which there's just so many benefits to that. I cannot emphasize enough how many benefits there are to that. So either if it's a small forgetting and I don't need a lot of time to kind of recover, then I'm going to just keep speaking. But if it's a long pause and I have to look at my notes or whatever, then when I'm recording, I'm going to go back to the beginning of that paragraph, the beginning of that sentence. Ideally the paragraph, because even the sentence is going to be, your vocal tone is going to be different. It makes editing very difficult. And you're not going to remember exactly where your head was and all that kind of stuff. So lining up the visuals and the sound when it comes to editing, especially when we're putting something together, can be quite difficult. So you want to start at kind of a natural chapter beginning or something, or you might put a slide, or you might zoom in or zoom out naturally because that's supported by the content, if you know what I mean. So there's that. Where am I? I don't know. Okay, I've talked about forgetting. Now, messing up is very similar for a recorded person, but when you're live, it's also quite similar. Actually, they're all quite similar. But messing up, you don't, if you've messed up and you know what you want to say, you don't need to ask your audience. You don't need to kind of go, where was I? You don't need to look at your notes. It's just about recovery. So say I've said the wrong thing or I've mispronounced something. I never want to stop and judge myself. We've said that already. But I also don't want to pretend it didn't happen. Like, I don't want to be in denial about it, because as soon as that happens, my audience is going to be like, did no one notice? Especially if you say something incorrect and you don't correct it. That's a bad idea, because and if you're using slides and you're saying something that's different from what's on the slides, your audience is going to get so stuck up on that, and they're going to be like, did they not notice? Which is the correct thing? Is the thing that's written the correct thing? Is the thing that said the correct thing? It can get really icky. So instead, always acknowledge it, but do your best not to kind of apologize. I mean, you could say, oh, sorry, what I meant to say was this. That kind of apology is okay. But as soon as you start beating yourself up, as soon as you start judging yourself, and for a lot of people, it's very difficult to apologize without making yourself less. You know, a strong apology is not something we're taught in our society. It can often be something that makes us feel less. It makes us feel stupid. It makes us feel small. You don't want to do that. You don't want to make yourself less while you're giving a talk or educating people because you're telling them not to listen to you if you do that. Stay humble, absolutely, but there's a difference. And so when you do that, make that mistake, you want to correct it, you want to acknowledge it, but you don't want to judge yourself, and do your best not to apologize unless it's, it's like, oh, so sorry, I got your name wrong. This is actually what it is. Or, double check. So sorry, I got your name wrong. Could you just remind me? Okay, yes, I do my best to, honor how to pronounce people's names. I want to make sure I get that right, and then keep going. That kind of apology is okay, but you don't want to make yourself less in any way. You can make a joke, absolutely, for sure. But the most important thing is not to make a big deal of it. So if you do make a joke of it, like if it's something that's quite funny, you can laugh with the audience. That can be a lot of fun. It can create a lot of rapport if you're laughing with your audience. So that can actually work in your favor. But if you make too big a deal of it, then it becomes awkward, and it also starts to take away from your content. So you never want the mistake to take center stage. You know what I mean? You don't want that. You don't want your talk to become about that. You want to stay in service to your content. So joking is great, and it's a really wonderful way to stay connected with your audience, keep them on your side, but you don't want to make such a big deal out of it that it becomes distracting. And then if you're recording, it's pretty much exactly the same thing as when you forget what you want to say. But if you make a small mistake, I always like to leave those in. I don't like to edit those out because it shows that I'm human. And that's actually really important, especially in video, especially when people are, they're building that know, like, and trust with you. If my videos are perfect and polished, it's not as human. There's no relation. It's hard to have a relationship with a perfect thing, with someone who doesn't have anything to kind of hang on to, any imperfections to get your fingers into. So I actually I make a habit of leaving my small mistakes, not a huge mistake. And if I have to stop and check my notes on a video, I will edit that out or I'll re-record it. But if it's just a small mistake, like I've said something wrong or I've tripped over my words, I will always leave that in. And the reason I do this actually is I started when I was learning to do what I do. I watched a lot of Brendan Burchard, and I still watch a lot of Brendan Burchard's videos. And he does this. He always leaves in his mistakes because he does everything live all the time. And I found it was so charming and it was so winning to see someone who's not scared of making a mistake. And it actually really helps you build your authority without having to lie, without having to fake it. We're not doing this fake it till you make it thing. We're not presenting a certain type of, you're being yourself, but you're confident enough to be like, yeah, I made a mistake. So what? I'm going to correct it and keep going, or laugh about it and keep going. And that allows people to really see who you are, see that you're human, and that obviously makes you more relatable. But also, there's a lot of authority in someone who can admit they're not perfect. Because something that I think we don't acknowledge enough, we have this double standard when it comes to being an audience versus a speaker. When we're speakers, we want to be perfect and we want everything to be, amazing and polished. But as an audience member, I don't trust someone who's too polished, because there's no transparency. You can see that this is something that they've created, they've worked a long time on, and they've given to you. And yes, there's a lot of respect in that, because they've spent a lot of time crafting and making it perfect. But there's no relationship. You can't relate to perfection. You can't relate to a machine, a robot that does everything right. You relate to humans. You relate to messiness. And so leaving that in allows to build relationship with your audience, which is, I think, the main reason we do talks and videos, is to build a relationship. So I think that's really important, is to leave some of those mistakes in, admit that you are human, embrace even that you are human, because that's why we do this. That's why I'm speaking to you and not writing an essay, is because I want that human connection. And you're watching the video and not reading an essay because you want the human connection too, I assume. So that, I think, we underrate that. We don't want to admit our fallibility, because I think a lot of us are scared that we're going to think too little of ourselves. But if you can trust yourself enough to make a mistake occasionally, and trust your audience enough to see past that mistake and see that you are still delivering fantastic content, that you're still an expert in what you're talking about, that you're still likable and trustable, and even more so because you make a mistake, I think that is where the genius is. And especially if you're super nervous and you've started out kind of maybe a little bit wooden and a little bit, when we make a mistake, that tension just, it's like making a joke. It's that same kind of tension release, and it can be gold. Maybe the audience wasn't with you, and you were, I'm doing this presentation and here I am and I'm doing this and it's perfect, but I'm feeling very tense and my audience isn't really with me. And then I screw up. I was like, oh my goodness, now my cover's blown. And then suddenly everyone's relaxed. They're laughing with you. It can be such a gem. We try so hard as speakers to find ways to make ourselves relatable, to build rapport, to find ways to feel like we're interacting with our audience. And those mistakes, they're like little gems that you can use and lean into, and really capitalize on the humanness and the spontaneousness and the unpredictability of it all. So that is my advice for if you forget what to say, or if you mess up. I messed up a million times in this video and forgotten what I want to say a few times. So hopefully I'm kind of practicing what I preach and giving you examples as I go. If you have any questions, please, you know where to find me. Just shoot me an email or find me on social media. I love talking about this kind of thing. I think bringing the humanness into our online communications, into our formal communication, even when we are in person, I think there's a lot of room to bring more humanity into that, to bring more connection and relationship into that. And I'm really excited about that topic. So I'd love to chat to you about it further. Thank you so much for listening to me. I appreciate your time. And I hope that you've learned something useful today.